Hey, Whiskey Ringers, it is the end of spring and almost into summer, and I have some big updates for you. First off, in case you haven't heard, we are going to be doing our first ever Whiskey Ring podcast barrel pick. It is going to be not one, but two barrels of Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof Rye straight from Lynchburg. And if that wasn't incentive enough, one of your fellow patrons, a patron at the $25 level, is going to be joining me for the pick. This is going to be the first pick of many. If you want your chance to be part of a pick team, this is the perfect time to up that Patreon pledge to $25. There are only 4 spots available at that tier. Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast. Today we are going to the far north of Scotland, still on the mainland, but the far north of Scotland. And I am thrilled to welcome on Mark Westmoreland from Wolfburn Distillery. Mark, welcome.
Hi, David. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to it, sir.
Absolutely. So just to say it up front, Wolfburn is distributed in the U.S. by one of my sponsors, Impex Beverages, and that is how we got in touch. But as always, you know this podcast, this will be no fluff, please. This will be just like any other podcast episode from me. We're going to get into the nitty gritty and really dig into this Northernmost Distillery. Do you still have that title, by the way? Has anyone superseded?
Well, what we like to say now, Thurso is still the most northerly town on the British mainland, but Doors Distillery has opened and they went on spirit last year. So that's just outside John O'Groats. So like, I describe it as like when we took the baton from Old Pultney. They used to be the most northerly, and when we came on spirit in 2013, we took the baton from Old Pultney, and we've just passed that baton on to Doors as the most northerly. Now, it's a nice sort of magnifier for a search on Google Maps where we are, that you've got so many distilleries now, but that north unique spirit, hopefully, that we produce, they'll endeavour to produce as well. But we are Wolfburn. We don't concentrate on anybody else. We just focus on what we do.
Fair enough. All right. So with that, let's get into it. Let's go into the history of Wolfburn Distillery all the way back to 1821.
Yeah. Original distillery, 1821, lasted probably 40 or 50 years. We do have some records of sort of voters' roll, which will give us who the stillman was or the warehouseman was. And we know in 1825, Wolfburn was the largest producer of whiskey in the area of Caithness. It was producing about 125,000 litres. Our owners had an interest in the old closed distilleries of Caithness. Andrew, one of our owners, grew up in Wick, so he had some friends and people he knew that worked at Old Pultney. And I think from that sort of early age, he started looking at like the old distilleries, and that snowballs. The Ex-Royal Marines, our owners, they had a business opportunity which they sold, and then they were sitting one day just deciding what to do. And Andrew said to Harry, "Do you fancy building a whiskey distillery?" And Harry went, "What do we know about building whiskey distilleries? That's what Google's for." So they basically just sat and searched and then phoned round and got some well-kent faces in the Scotch whisky industry at the end of the phone and started asking some questions. The good news, they'd both actually trudged over the moors in Thurso to see where the old distillery was. Unfortunately, there's nothing left, just the old sort of firm foundation stones. Caithness was world-renowned and still is for its quality of stone from the quarries as well. So they knew where the old Wolfburn was. And luckily for them, the water source, the Wolfburn, the Wolf Spring, still runs. And there was a new industrial estate getting built. And there was 2 plots of land available just at the back of the Wolfburn. So they snapped them up. And then they approached Forsyths of Rothes, the famous still makers. Richard Forsyth had just taken over the company from his father. He wanted to put his own stamp on the company, I suppose, for the want of a better word. And in conjunction with Richard Richard had a set of stills that he had always wanted to make, a wash still and a spirit still. And our team, our first distiller, came up from Glenfarclas, Shane Fraser. In conjunction, sitting down, Shane was given 2 tasks. Make a spirit of your own choosing, make a spirit that we can sell relatively young as well. Because we didn't do gin, we don't do vodka, we don't do rum. We're a whiskey distillery. The clue's in the title. We make whiskey. We're traditional whiskey makers. And when Shane looked at the stills that Richard had always dreamed of making, he says, yeah, I'll be able to use them to make the spirit. Distillery was built end of summer 2012 to winter 2012, and we first went on spirit on the 25th of January 2013. That's when we first filled our casks after all the experimentation in the mash tun weights and the fermentation times and the distillation was done. So the 25th of January 2013, some 10 years ago, which is a huge milestone for any distillery. 10 years old, you've got to celebrate that. And here we are today. So yeah, a brief history, a very, very brief history, but from the old to the now reawakened name, the Wolfburn Distillery in Thurso. A special place for me. I was born and bred in Thurso, spent my formative years there. Used to pick mushrooms in the field where the distillery now is with my dad, and it just conjures up so many great memories of my childhood as well. So as the global brand ambassador for the firm, if I can't be passionate about my area, my distillery, my memories, nobody can. So this is why I love doing things like this and speaking to yourself tonight, David.
And it just brought up a thought too. I mean, the original distillery, it's one that, as you said, operated for, we think, around between 30 to 50 years, something like that. And then for one reason or another, went out of business or stopped producing.
Yeah.
Having been born and bred in the area and grown up in the area, were there any like local stories or histories kept about the distillery, or was it kind of low key as part of the history?
Going way back when, I suppose there would have been at the time a huge buzz about the town and the distilleries and the fact that it was the largest producer. But going on some sort of 150 years when I was born, no pictures, no bottles, no recipes, not even any of the buildings were still there. Again, just ruins, but not even just ruins, just the old foundations, just the old sort of big flagstones. And like anything in the north, because we're so remote, when something decides to cease operation, it just doesn't sit there. It's repurposed. All the stone would have been taken away, it had been used in something else. The flagstones would have been either used for field division, or they would have been used for some pavements or even roofs. The flagstones in Caithness are very hard wearing. The machinery would have been probably sold or auctioned off. But yeah, I think that lends itself to some of the mystery and some of the legend and the history about the distillery, that there isn't anything that we can definitely put our finger on to say this is what's happened. So there's maybe a lot of conjecture and a lot of rumor and a lot of, well, maybe this happened or maybe that happened, or so I think it adds to the mystery itself of the original distillery, and hopefully that mystery we can continue with our own spirit, because you don't want to reveal everything. It's not like the Wizard of Oz. You don't want to see behind the curtain all the time. You want to have, like, I still get excited for new releases. Sometimes I just don't want to know what's coming out. I know it sounds crazy, but I like to be that kid in the sweet shop as well. When I get that bottle, when I open that bottle, when I taste that bottle, without any previous knowledge or any involvement in that whiskey expression, and it keeps it interesting. It keeps it, it keeps me motivated as well, that I don't have to know everything about the distillery, and hopefully the questions that you'll have tonight I'll be able to answer. But if you ask me something that I'm not supremely confident on. We've got the bosses on WhatsApp and the distillery manager on WhatsApp, so you never know. During the conversation, I might get a response or the right reply. You just never know.
Fair enough. So before we go into the distillery as it stands now, um, you've spoken about your own history on a couple of other podcasts. So rather than ask you your journey, and we just spoke about it before air. Rather than asking you for your whole history to where you are now, I wanted to actually ask you about a question you answered on Inside Whiskey. This was probably about 2, maybe 3 years ago.
Okay.
I love Inside Whiskey. They're always a source of research for me when I'm doing these interviews, and they like to end with quick questions. One of them being, if you could be anyone else in the whiskey world, who would you be? And do you remember your answer?
No, I don't. I'll be honest with you, I don't. If it was a quick question, it would have came out in my head at the time, and then it probably would have a memory that escaped that I've never managed to catch again. So please refresh my memory.
Sure. So you chose Jim Swan.
Okay.
And so I wanted to ask you about this because I'm a huge fan of his as well. Of course, he has since passed. I think at that point he had passed as well.
Yeah.
So, but I'm a huge fan of his projects and the ones that live on under his name. But I'm curious why he was your choice.
See, to be honest with you, it's probably nothing to do with projects. It's nothing to do with design. It's nothing to do with what he wrote, and it's when you speak to people, and you speak to people that knew him. I never knew him. I'd never met him. But when you speak to well kent faces or well kent people in the whiskey industry, the love and the resonance that they hold him, and it's like, as a people person, for me, it's like when somebody does their work or they do their job to the best of their ability, but they do it in a way that people can respond and people can relate and people can warm to that person. You don't have to be hiring and firing and living in an ivory tower and keeping people away from you to be the best. I think Jim, when you speak to people, was down to earth. He was honest. He was helpful. He would bend over backwards to try and steer people in the right direction. And I just love that about people. I just love the fact that you can be remembered in that way, as well as the huge projects and the huge help that you have been for the industry. So yeah, I think that's probably why I chose Jim.
All makes sense. I agree. I've spoken to many distilleries that he either had a hand in or were influenced by him, and all had nothing but positive things to say. He took an interest in the locality in particular, like working on everything from M&H to Cavalon to lakes, and Pandare, and all these are completely different places, but he seemed to take a special interest in imbuing the product with some element of that place, and just what a mind too.
Yeah, and that's probably that's testament to his vision and his passion as well. That he looks at the location at various distilleries and decides, well, you're on these unique locations. You want to make a unique whiskey for your location, and I'll help you do that. And that's a really nice way for us when we're in the far north of Scotland. You don't just fall out of Edinburgh, Glasgow, and you come across Wolfburn Distillery. You've got to take planes, trains, or automobiles. And it's about a 5-6 hour drive from the central belt of Scotland. So we want our unique area to create a uniqueness in our spirit as well. And I always say to people, make the effort to come and see us, make the pilgrimage. You shall be rewarded.
Yes, I've heard you like, you personally may not have control over this necessarily, but I know you like when you have distillery only releases, because it is like that little reward at the end of the trip for
It
people.
is. It's like the gold at the end of the rainbow, I suppose, when you're searching. We did quite a lot of distillery releases in the early stages, sort of 18, 19. We've now sort of turned away from doing sort of spring, summer, autumn releases to having a hand fill on site, usually, depending on what's available. So yeah, again, it's always nice to visit a distillery and come away with something that's truly unique that nobody else can get unless they've actually made the effort to come and see it. You know, it's a wee reward. It's a single cask, and it's something to treasure, but it's something, in my opinion, to drink and to savour and to share, because we make whiskey in a bottle with a hole in the top for a reason. We want folk to drink it rather than just stick it on the shelf and look at it. It's like, I couldn't do that. It'd be like the Alice in Wonderland bottle, you know, with a wee tag on it saying, please drink me. Please drink responsibly. Yes, of course. But coming away from a distillery with a distillery own bottle, something unique, and create a memory, you know, crack it open, invite your friends round, save it for a wedding or something. But, you know, this is the glue that will bind people together. And when you're drinking a whiskey, you'll remember the people you were with, the area you were at, the thing you were celebrating, or if you weren't celebrating anything, the dram that you were pouring as well. So yeah, it's nice to do something to reward people that come and visit us.
Fantastic. And I do want to point out too, you've called the distillery at some time the one of the ugliest distilleries there, but
Yeah.
it seems though you've got, you know, there are plenty of distilleries in Scotland that don't have any visitor allowances, but it sounds like you've been able to and Wolfburn has been able to straddle that difference between being a production facility first and foremost, but also having some space for visitors to see what's going on and have that hands-on experience.
Yeah, our bosses will always say, making whiskey is the priority. Nothing should come and really take away that intense effort that we make on site to produce the whiskey. We don't have a fancy visitor centre. We don't have a coffee shop or a restaurant. When you mentioned the most ugliest or one of the ugliest distilleries, from the outside, before we had a sign and before we had a statue and before we had signs at the bottom of the road, because it's an industrial estate, people were driving around knowing there was a distillery somewhere, but they never used to be able to find us, because from the outside it's been described as a cowshed or a storage warehouse. And I always laugh and joke when I use the reference at some of the shows and festivals that I do. It's like people. I don't care what you look like. As soon as you open the door at Wolfburn, you're into the beating heart, you know, and that's where the magic happens. Doesn't care what you look like, but if you've got a good soul and you've got good purpose, then you're friends of ours.
Yeah, love it. All right, so with that, let's get right into the distillery. So first off, let's go back to the fact that you didn't produce any vodka or gin, no clear spirits. It waited until the whiskey was ready.
Yeah.
So I've more and more distilleries are taking that route now. It's risky, of course, but it's being done. The question then becomes, how did Wolfburn and its founders, secure, let's say, enough capital that they were able to not only build how they wanted, but also hold off without any revenue for 3 years after laying down the first spirit?
Yeah, great question. With regards to risk, we've got a huge sign in the distillery when you come in. Sits above our old Caperdonis washbacks, and it says, "Fortune favours the brave." So without risk, there isn't reward. Now, our owners were very successful businessmen. After they left the Royal Marines, they had various business interests, and they came to a point that they managed to sell one of their businesses, and they were looking at the next challenge. 4 to 5 million in your back pocket to build startup costs. And yes, 3 years with no revenue coming in. So hence the reason why the two tasks were for our first distiller, Shane, build build the spirit of your own choosing, but let's have it relatively young so we can sell. So that's why we aim for the quarter cask maturations as well, ex Isla quarter casks. Smaller the cask, faster the maturation, more intense maturation. Ex Isla just giving it a wee edge as well, just a little bit of smokiness to it. And that was our first release in 2016. So just over 3 years since our first ever cask was filled on the 25th of January. And yet, going into the finances, way above my pay grade, unfortunately, but I'm speaking to the bosses. It was, as we say in Scotland, squeaky bum time. You know, it was fingers crossed and let's see what happens, because yes, the whiskey industry is about repetition and process, but without the prior knowledge what the spirit's going to taste like, it's just wait and see. And that's the risk, but that's also the huge joy when you're making whiskey, because you don't know exactly what the spirit will taste like when you pop that bung and you decide to dip the cock of dog and you take a dram out of it in the warehouse. And that's the skill of the distillers and the wants of the owners when things are going to be ready for bottling. And because we store everything on site, traditional dunnage warehouses, casks go in and they barely move. We don't swap them about, no more than 3 casks high. And we hand bottle. We're hand bottling all our whiskey on site. So it means that we have, again, that supreme control over the process. Nobody else can come in and do part of the business, or we have to tanker our spirit somewhere else, or we have to rely on a bottling hall. We do everything ourselves because then we can keep the standards very, very high, and we can keep our head and our chest out because we're doing everything as proud as we can for the brand and for the whiskey. I've probably described the whiskey as our children before, and we like to nurture and grow and protect, and then we like to send it out to the world for everybody's amazement and joy. But big risk for the owners. 10 years on, the risk is still there. The risks now, rather than just a startup, you've got risks of material. We were paying £500 a ton. We're now paying over £1,000 a ton. Oil for the boiler, just different costs. Our maltings, different costs. But yeah, it's a challenge, and we always say at Wolfburn, yes, fortune favours the brave, but we've also got a saying that if some problem is presented to us, adapt and overcome. Because we're a small company, we can turn very, very quickly. We're not like that big super tanker taking miles to stop. We just put a hand on the tiller and twist it, and we go off in a different direction. That's the great thing about the company. There's only 18 people in the entire company, and that includes our owners, our brand manager, our accountant, folk at the distillery, our admin staff, our tour staff, our director, and me, lowest than a snake's belly in a wagon rut, I've described myself as. But I get the best job. I get to do these things. I get to go around the world and speak about the distillery and bring joy to people when I pull a bottle of whiskey out my pocket. Before my previous job as a police officer, people used to shout and swear at me. Now I go into situations with whiskey under my arm, they shout and cheer and clap, and the smiles are abundant. So yeah, it's a good kudos.
And in looking at the lineup that you have and getting to taste it, so I got to taste the full core lineup plus small batch and small batch and one other. And in doing so, of course, got taste small, and they all were quite different. I'm going to be posting tasting notes for them. But it was very obvious, number one, that Thurso to me, it seemed like it had more in common in certain ways with the Orkney Islands than the rest of mainland Scotland.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help think back to one of my very first episodes with Highland Park, where they were talking about how Orkney was Nordic, it was Viking, it was not Angli, no, what's the right word? Well, it was different heritage, let's say,
Yeah.
Than the rest of Scotland and England. And with that, Thurso it's at the far north. It's formerly under Norse Arcadian rule, and
yeah,
it's this major stopping point for Scandinavia, the Northern Isles, and those going west. So, so you incorporate Viking themes into your bottlings, into the mythology around the brand. Besides what the consumer sees, like the names on the bottles and things like that, are there other aspects of that history that go into the kind of ethos and process of Wolfburn?
Yeah, I would say that we're guided. We're guided by our history, our heritage, our community, and you mentioned Highland Park there, and as I said earlier on, we concentrate on what we do, how we do it. Like Thurso, Thor's town, a great Viking settlement way back when. We'll dip into that, and we'll take references. Like even when I grew up, the street names that were around about me, Sven Road, Olaf, Sigurd, Thorfinn, Thorkel, it was all sort of based on some of the great Viking stories and sagas. Wolfburn, we've done one expression in our core expression called Langskip, the longship, and we wanted something that would relate to something that we felt was quite powerful and quite sturdy, as we say in Scotland. So the Langskip name for our 58% ex-bourbon cask whiskey seemed fitting and proper that we called it that. We have done a Kilver series. We got asked in 2016, so just when we had started production on our Northland and Aurora, that came out in 2016. They were our first two commercial releases. The local Caithness Viking Festival organisers asked us if we could do a special bottling for the Caithness Viking Festival. Now, rather than just do a one-off bottling, Wolfburn sat back and thought, this is an opportunity for us. We could actually put a statement of intent out. And what we did, there was a Kilver stone, it's called the Kilver stone, found on the Kilver farm in Gotland in 1903 in Sweden. It flipped over and you saw the full rune alphabet, and then a magical symbol that was protecting the person buried under. So rather than do just one bottling, we decided to use this Viking alphabet as a series of bottlings to do. And we did the first one for the Caithness Viking Festival in 2016. We are now up to edition number 11. We've just released ISA, ISA, which means like hail or ice. Every rune has a different meaning as well. And we've got 13 expressions to go. Now, for us, just over 3 years old, to stand there and go, we're going to do a 24 series whiskey, folk were like, don't be silly, don't be stupid. You're only 3 years old. And we were like, to hell with everybody else. This is what we think. This is what we should do. Let's go and do it. And we've continued to do that to great success. So the Viking spirit, the warrior spirit, when you talk about our owners and you talk about how we deal, the distillery is probably run like a military operation. Everybody knows their place, everybody has their specialities. Some people are better at other things, but that's what a team does. You bring your experience together for the benefit of the team. And our history and our heritage and our knowledge of the past is useful to focus on our future as well. So I don't know if I've answered that, David, but I've certainly given it a good try.
I think you did, and the Kilver series is one of my last questions on my outlines, but
okay.
I'll jump there just for a second. I wanted to note that you were about halfway there. You just got into edition 11. Without necessarily going into each one of them, what makes each of these releases special or different from your core range?
We try and source the best casks of the year. Now, sometimes we're lucky because we have an abundance of great casks. And in the past, I think we have done 2 releases for calendar year, or over a 12-month period. But again, what we want, we've got our core expressions, which are the backbone of the brand. Like any business, you want that as your firm foundation. The Kilver for us has to be something just that wee bit special, a wee bit more unique. And it is basically down to us sourcing casks from the warehouse to create something that wee bit unusual that hasn't been done before, or doing something and supercharging it, or injecting it with some more passion and flavour. So we've got to choose the best casks, usually per year. And the Kilver series at the moment, probably the last one sold out within the hour, and we sell direct from the distillery. And it happens like that nearly every release now. Our servers crashed a couple of releases ago. We had to get NASA servers just about to cope with the demand, because we let people know when things are being released, and then everybody just bombards the site. We even had like a queuing system that you basically be able to take a ticket and you were position 60 in the queue, and it gave you you'll have to wait 30 minutes, then you've got 15 minutes when you get to the shop, and then you'll be able to purchase. So that's all changed. Again, as a business, you have to evolve. You have to look at what works, what doesn't work. You have to listen to your consumer base as well. The annoyance that some people couldn't get onto the site, or the worry that they were going to miss out, especially because they've been collecting the Kilver from day one, way back in 2016 as well. And that's important for us, and that's a very important part of my job as well, because I get to see the front-facing public. I get to, yes, listen to their accolades about the whiskey, but listen to their gripes and groans sometimes about Wolfburn as a process or as a distillery. And I feed that back direct to the owners as well, because you're not going to be able to placate everybody. But the great thing about what we're trying to do at Wolfburn is traditional whiskey makers. We want to cast our net very wide to capture the majority of the whiskey drinking public. So we're not going to be coming out with weird and wonderful, wacky expressions. We want people to come to the brand because we focus on our quality of our taste and flavour, and our maturation, and our Wolfburn essence, our Wolfburn DNA, which is quite fruity, quite floral, quite light, and quite vibrant. And we want that DNA to go through everything that we produce. And as you mentioned, the remoteness and the uniqueness of the North Highlands, we want that to be an accolade, and we want that to be a bonus, and we want that to drive people to the brand because of the uniqueness of the spirit, of the characteristic as well.
I think that leads perfectly into the next question I have, which is Wolfburn sits on the largest expanse of blanket peat bog definitely in Europe and perhaps the world. When you start talking about that locality and the elements of the place and the history, I'm curious what being directly on a peat bog means for means for the water sources, the locality, the regionality. Like what kind of flavors or other elements does it impart being directly on that peat versus, having peat nearby and bringing it in?
Yeah, it is a unique environment. You rightly say it's Europe's largest peat bog. We're trying to get World UNESCO Heritage status. We missed out on it this year, just over the last few months, but we can reapply, I think, as a community. And it's flat. The Caithness landscape is very bleak. It's, the wind howls, the trees grow at a 45-degree angle because the wind just rattles across the countryside as well. And not only does it do that, but the Pentland Firth, so the water between the north of Scotland and the Orkney Islands, one of the most treacherous parts of the UK because of the two seas from either side, the east and the west, sort of meeting. That's why Orkney, and that's why the north, Thurso especially, was used as the Viking safe haven, because they needed safe harbours because of the trials and tribulations. Going back to the peat bog, it's, people will ask about the water, and people will ask because, remember I said about the Caithness stone, the quarries and the stone quality round about Caithness is absolutely superb. So you've got great water, boggy water, and you've got great boggy water going through great stone, and it's travelling around the countryside in that respect. A funny story. One of the Forsyths lads that came up to work on the distillery had asked one of our owners if what was the water test like, and he was met by, "What do you mean? The test you do for making good whiskey." We've not done one. No, we've not done one yet. We don't know if we're going to do one. But you're building a distillery, you're spending all this money, and you've not even tested your water yet. The guy came back when the stills were being commissioned, and he got a wee bit of new make spirit direct from the still safe, and he looked at it, smelled it, drank it, put it down, shook his head, picked the glass up again, nosed it again, tasted it again, and basically turned to the owner and said, "For somebody that's no tested the water, building a whiskey distillery, you've actually hit the jackpot. I build whiskey distilleries for a living, and this is one of the best new makes that I've tasted." So, that's if you're looking for proud moments and sort of standing tall and big, for one of our owners, that was a huge compliment and a huge accolade, and probably a huge some faith in his business acumen, his faith in his business that we were going to build Wolfburn Distillery. We were going to use the same water source. I got asked in a tasting in New Zealand this year, what was the water source? And I said, well, it's a natural spring that rises, falls down the moors. There's so many different layers of maybe peat and stone, and the guy says, well, I'm a geologist and I get a really rich sort of mineral quality from the whiskey as well. And it is a very mineral rich water source. Even our filters, at a time we couldn't understand why our filters were really orangey and like cloggy. It's not the technical term, but it was like a really sort of orangey sludge coming through the filters. And again, it's just the quality and the type of the water that we have that we're bringing into the distillery. The great news is we've got an old Caperdonic washback, 57,000 litres, which we use for our spring water tank. So we take that direct from the Wolfburn, and the other spring water tanks are effluent tank, our waste tank. We tend not to get them mixed up for obvious reasons, but we've got the Wolfburn at the back of us, which is a godsend. But when the weather is like it is in Scotland at the moment, the sun is splitting the skies. A couple of years ago, the Wolfburn dried up really to a trickle, and we had to do our summer maintenance program that wee bit earlier because we didn't, somebody says, oh, just turn the tap on. That's not what we do. We're traditional whiskey makers. You have to deal with events that happen. And as I said earlier on, adapt and overcome. Okay, the rain isn't forecast. We're not going to get whiskey. The spring is trickling. Let's do our summer shutdown. Let's do our maintenance program earlier. And then when it does rain, we'll get back on to spirit. And that's exactly what we did. So again, adapt and overcome.
With the water source being so one, such a source of pride, but also uniquely minerally and with so much character to it, do you filter it at all before adding it to the whiskey, either before?
Yeah, it comes in filtered. Yeah, we filter it into the distillery. Heaven forbid there's going to be some things in there that we don't want to see floating around in the mash tun or in our distillation, or heaven forbid somebody finding a creepy crawly in one of the bottles. But again, we're probably we're at the mercy of sort of the food and beverage production laws and regulations and filtration and ticking boxes for Scottish water and doing everything that we have to do. But because we're filtering it, it doesn't mean that we're losing any of the goodness, I would say. I'm no scientist, but without a great water source, yes, it's one of the parts of the process. But yeah, let's do it in a way that it can be sustainable as well. And that's, that can be a worry sometimes, because a lot of people look at distilleries and the first thing that they look at is their environmental footprint as well. Do they want to associate with a distillery that tries to do the best for the environment, for the location, for the community? And we are certainly trying to do that with things that we do and things that we have to replace. We'll always look at, is there a greener way? Is there it's maybe not it's never the cheaper way, I know that. But again, for business continuity and sustainability, it's a very hard decision sometimes which way we decide to go. But we're always looking at that reason, that environmental footprint as well. Let's be aware of it, and let's try and do things in a way that we're not going to just take. There has to be some give back.
So just digging just clarifying a little bit on that. So definitely understand the filtration for, as you put it, creepy crawlies for sure. Don't want that in my bottle. And things like that. But when it comes time to do things like proofing down, or you reverse osmosising it, or basically, it comes down to, are you completely neutralizing the water, or is it still retaining some of that character at the very end?
Again, probably right above my pay grade. What we want is, and like what I've been told, we want to use the water for not just production, but for cooling, for sure. we use we recycle the hot aspect of it as well. So we're reducing our bills, our sort of boiler costs as well. It's probably a question that I can't, if I told you a cup out the Wolfburn water and then a cup out of the water we use at the distillery, what is the difference? I probably, I couldn't put my finger on it. Taste wise, I've tasted water from the Wolfburn, I've tasted water from the distillery, and for me, there isn't any difference in taste and flavour as well. And that's, I suppose that's maybe testament to why our whiskey has that character and uniqueness then, because we're, if you find something that's unique and you find something that's different, you don't want to strip it bare. You don't want to ruin that. Yes, you'll have to filter it and do what you have to do for the laws and regulations, but you want to retain the the basic block, because that's what's going to start the production. So yeah, good question though, David. Good question. I like that. You're poking the beast. I like that.
Hey, I gotta know. What can I say?
Wolfburn Distillery captures the spirit of Scotland's far north. As the northernmost distillery on the Scottish mainland, Wolfburn ties together long fermentation, slow distillation, and seaside maturation for unique and superb character. Originally founded in 1821, this exceptional distillery was restored in 2012 to its original greatness, resurrecting a 200-year-old distillery on the largest blanket peat bog in all of Europe. Whether you're drinking Northland, Wolfburn's first expression, aged in American oak quarter casks, Aurora, a beautiful sherried whiskey laid down in a combination of bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks, Morvern, their lightly peated variety, or Langskip, their cask strength release, there's a Wolfburn for everyone. Arriving to the States later this year is their first permanent age-stated release, the 10-year-old. You can also find small batch releases and limited edition bottlings at specialty retailers across the U.S. Reach out to our friends at Impex Beverages for more information on where to find your favorite expression. Wolfburn Distillery. Fortune favors the brave.
So, with that, let's jump into the production process. And before I ask the next question, I do want to point out that on the Wolfburn website, you guys have a fantastic infographic on every step and number of the process, from milling all the way down to barreling. And I would definitely encourage people to look at that. I'll include a link to it in the show notes as well, because it really does cover everything. And if you've wondered in a whiskey process what something is called, or what one part of the process is called, you'll probably figure it out from this infographic. Now, so with that said, I'm going to skip over a couple of pieces just because that information is there. But the first one I have to ask is one of Wolfburn's mottos, if you will, is low and slow. So slow fermentation and distillation, quality over speed. So on a practical level, what does that mean for the process?
Yeah. Again, when you're trying to create a unique spirit, there's various ways to go about it. Now, it's not the cheapest, having quite a long fermentation time, because we're not controlled by accountants, thankfully, the bean counters. They're not just saying, right, that's it. It's hit so many hours. Let's get it to the next stage. Let's keep the production moving. So depending on what day the mash is done, sometimes it's over 90 hours, sometimes it's over 70 hours, the maturation as well. The fermentation. Long fermentation, hand pitched anchor yeast in as well, 5 kilograms pitched in. With longer fermentation, you're wanting those you're wanting the yeasty beastie to do the work, consume the sugars, make the alcohol, get it, get as much yield out of the beast as possible. It's great for business, but we're wanting our, that lovely sort of fruity ester to it. Longer fermentation adds to that. The gentle like low and slow, the gentle distillation as well. The way you look at the stills, and you've seen the design of the stills as well, especially in our pot still. We've got a huge big extra onion, big bulbous, a lot of copper contact, slightly downward line arms. The stills aren't huge. They're, at the moment, we're doing 6 or 8 mashes a week. We've probably got capacity to do, without any equipment changes, about 160,000 litres. But the guys that are on the stills, guys and girls that are on the stills, they've got lives as well. We don't run the stills 24/7. Monday to Friday, weekends off, 2 shifts, and low and slow, or unhurried is probably another sort of reference that we use. In the north, we're very laid back. If we can't get it done, let's not lose any sleep over it. Let's just get it up and running tomorrow, and let's make the most of it. If we have to put in a hard shift or work an extra day or whatever, let's do that. And even at the moment, I said we could produce 160,000 litres without any additional equipment. We're probably still only doing what the original Wolfburn Distillery did in 1825, 125,000 litres, because we store everything on site. And if you store everything on site, you've got warehouse costs. And pardon the pun, but warehouse building, the costs are through the roof. They really are. And we've just built our 5th warehouse this year on site, and we've extended warehouses 1 and 2. I may be going off just a wee bit off topic. I'll apologise.
No, that's
fine. But even when we look at our production, when you're creating loads of spirit, you need loads of warehouse space. So we don't have any plans to increase our production, because for us, it's about the confidence and security of supply across the world, and we seem to be doing that. Nobody seems to be ordering and having to wait, or nobody seems to be running out. The demand is there, it works. And again, that's a headache. It's always a thought, when the Wolfburn name gets more recognised, and I'm at the front of crowds firing Wolfburn t-shirts from a t-shirt cannon. That's never going to happen. We don't need any smoke and mirrors like that. The quality of our spirit will sell our spirit. My job's just getting it to the lips. But we're going to move off our dry storage, like our bottles, our cardboard, our packaging, our corks, our labels. That'll go off site to a different part of the industrial estate. But that'll free up maybe another half a warehouse for maturation, which is great for us because, again, traditional dunnage warehouses. And folk will say, why not palletize your whiskey? But we're traditional whiskey makers. We want the outside environment to circulate at a decent temperature rather than the highs and the lows of the casks in the warehouse. The sea air that comes billowing in off the Pentland Firth, that rattles across the countryside as well. So again, you're wanting that uniqueness of our environment, surrounded by farmers' fields and the gorse and heather. You want all that to have an impart on your maturation as it slices through the warehouse as well. So yeah, low and slow, good gentle distillation, decent amount of fermentation, and just creating a beautiful sort of lovely sort of tropical fruit flavored spirit, in my opinion. I sometimes describe it as like a can of pineapples. You open it, you take the pineapple rings out, and then you slurp the sugary the sugary liquid from the tin. I get that from our new make spirit. That's just, I get like a banana or a pineapple tropical fruit flavour from it. And I love it. And we've recently, I'm just back from Germany, and we've done some tour bottlings in rum casks, full maturation in rum casks. And it's a beautiful marriage of our new make spirit and rum casks as well. But yeah, sorry, I went off a wee bit topic there, David, but sometimes it's quite hard to stop me. You've just got to steer me in the right direction.
No, I like letting my guests talk, because that's how the most interesting parts come about. It's not my questions, it's where they lead to. So just to paint a picture for those who are listening right now before they go to the infographic is, so as you said, you got 2 stills. They're not small, I would say. They're kind of a medium-sized still. The wash still is 5,500 liters.
Yeah.
The spirit still, so the second still, is 3,600 liters, and fired by coils inside, or warmed, I should say, by coils inside, steam coils, which you can, as you said, you can do those more at a more controlled level at a slower, lower heat than, let's say, a direct fire.
Yeah, and like the guys that are on the stills, and the great thing is our sort of production operatives, they're a mash. They're in the warehouse. They're on the stills. They've got every part of the business. It's not just a stillman. It's not just a warehouseman. It's not just a mashman. They're doing every part of the business, and the inspection windows in the stills. They're always watching. They're always listening. Just to see the veracity of the bubbling, or the how fast or how big, and it's manual turn down on the heat for the stills. It's not computer controlled. It's all done by knowledge. It's done by training. It's done with a guided arm and under a watchful eye as well, because the guys that are getting trained, guys and girls, sorry, guys is just a generic term that I use, apologies, but the folk that are getting trained at the distillery, they're seeing all aspects, and which is great, because then they have an understanding of the whole process and what it takes to create a great spirit. So when they leave, or they're suitably trained, any distillery across the world would snap them up. They really would, because they have the knowledge, and they have the confidence, and they have the maturity that they've been at a small independent distillery, but they've had their hands on all the parts of the process. It's like, somebody building a muscle car, from start to finish. They know everything about the car that they're driving, not just a wheel specialist, not just a brake specialist, not just an engine specialist. It's the whole rigmarole of, from start to finish, the production and how it should be done, and what the result is, and how to get the best results as well. So yeah, all credit to them. They do the hard yards. I'm just the jazz hands at the front.
As I was tasting through these, I have a weird obsession with knowing about the barley, and I don't know why. It's just one of those things that I latch onto, let's say. Yeah. And certainly in tasting the whiskeys, to me at least, in the vast majority of Scotch whiskey, let's say, and this is a huge overgeneralization, but go with me on this one. I tend to get the barley notes that are lemony, citrusy, some cereal notes on there, but generally pretty light. You'll get a maltiness in the back, a little bit of darkness there.
Yeah.
And when I was tasting the Wolfburn releases, to me, I got a different barley profile. Okay. And it wasn't strictly from because of the peat or anything like that, or the peated casks. It was more a creamier barley and a creamier, more vanilla forward sense of it. So yeah, just love to know more about where you get your barley from and how you get it.
I know what you're saying there about that sort of creaminess, or that sort of beautiful mouthfeel that you get with our whiskies. And mouthfeel is important sometimes as taste and flavour. What it does, what experience it is in your mouth, and how it attacks or how it lulls your senses into that taste and flavour. But yeah, we don't do our own maltings on site, so we're not like any other, not like from like maybe some of the other distilleries that do. But we tend to sort of spread the love for the maltings. So Boort Malt in Buckie, fine Speyside producer. We take a lot of their barley from the area that they're in, but they also, they also import a lot of barley as well. Baird's, Inverness, Muntons in North Yorkshire. Muntons have got a peated facility that they only do peated malt, and we get our peated from there. But what we like to do, we like to spread the love, because we like to, obviously, as business folk, we like to get the best price. But we also want to spread our risk as well, because heaven forbid something happened to one of those maltings. and we're relying on them for everything. We're getting 28, 30 ton of malt delivered every month. So it's a long journey north, and sometimes, depending on accidents or weather, or there can be some problems in logistics for delivery. Just like trying to get the whiskey out of Thurso, there's sometimes logistic problems as well. But yeah, we tend to concentrate on these maltings because they're the experts in their field. What we do is we give them a stipulation what we want, and they provide it. Now, again, for us as a business, we don't have that control because we don't do everything ourselves. But everything apart from that, we do have control over. I was told by a distiller that the barley in Caithness, because of the soil and the peat, can be too nitrogen rich for great whiskey production. It's still good for whiskey, but I was told, and again, not my area of expertise, but he said that there are better choices of barley concerta that we're using, but the maltings themselves, we let them do their expertise, and then we bring it in. So yeah, creaminess, a difference in our spirit from what you're used to. I'll take that. That's a good. That is a good line. Write that down, and we'll quote you on the next part of the website, David, because this is what we strive for. We want to have that accolade when somebody picks up a glass, noses it, tastes it. We want that to Wolfburn coming out of their lips as well, because it's a unique flavour and taste of spirit. It's similar, it's what they expect, but it's just got that edge. It's just got that proclamation, shall we say, of we are Wolfburn. And that's what we strive for.
I've heard you say in a couple of podcasts, and I liked, and in a couple of interviews, I liked that line, that's the accolade. That's the goal, is even 10, 15 years from now, for people to be able to sip it and say, that's Wolfburn. And I think it's pretty rare at this point that you can kind of do that with a particular distillery. For instance, I've been trying for months, literally months, just trying 10 distilleries now on Isla.
Okay.
Just going through them and trying to differentiate them by flavor, at least to a point where I can kind of guess what I'm tasting based on, if it's an undisclosed independent bottling, let's say, I can figure out what I'm tasting. And some I get, like a Beaumont, I get more ashy. Lefroy I just don't like, so it's just too much for me. Like we'll add more smoke in the nose. So I'm trying to get to that point with that, but as I was tasting it, I did write down in my notes, as I was tasting the Wolfburn, I should say, I wrote down in my notes that there was a clear differentiator. And for me, it was the barley in particular and the malted barley flavor that came out as a differentiator. It held up through the peat, whether it was the peat cask for the Northland and the Aurora, or for the Morvernon, it was where the peat is, where the malt is peated itself. It still held up through those, which is important. It's very easy to get lost.
Yeah, and you're right. We discussed that earlier on about identity. Once you have an identity, you don't want anything to overshadow or overwhelm that as well. And I've said before, even our sort of maturation, whether it's 60-70% of the taste and flavour that comes from the maturation, you don't want that maturation to ruin our DNA, to ruin the essence. We want that to be, and I'll go back to it, that proclaimed, that proclamation. We want it to be raised, and we want it to be up, pushed to the upper echelons, because that is Wolfburn. That lovely, fruity, floral, light, vibrant spirit that we make, which has beautiful taste and flavor in it already, we don't want the maturation to quell or to quench. We want it to be pushed to the upper echelons. We want it to be proclaimed as well. And it's a skill. It's a skill that the guys have been doing for years, that the production, it's about the repetition. It's about making sure that everyone's done the same. It's about, I laugh and joke with them sometimes to say, oh, you did that the same last week when I saw you, or you did that the same. Can you not do anything different? I do have that sort of jovial mischief about me, but I know that it's important. It's uniquely important that once you get the process, you have to do everything the same to get the same beautiful new make spirit, because that's the star of the show. That's the building block that we want. Just like we said about the water. Once you get the new make spirit, everything else has to proclaim that. Everything else then has to help that make it as best as we can for whiskey production. And we certainly seem to be doing that. And comments like that, David, we'll take. Don't worry. Write it down, send it in. We'll post it. Don't worry.
I'll hold you to that. I've been dying to get on a whiskey website being quoted, so be happy to have you guys my first quote.
Come on.
So before we get to because I am going to definitely ask you about the wood management.
Okay.
I am going to ask you about the wood management profile, but before we get there, I want to ask about this. I think it was hinted at in another interview, and that is this question of, has the character and profile of the spirit changed from that first spirit in 2013 to today?
Okay. Personally, I don't think so. Personally, there hasn't been any change that I'm aware of. We have changed master distillers. Our original distiller left 2019. He's in your neck of the woods. He's up at 10 Mile Distillery up at Upper State New York.
Oh yeah.
Wazaic or Wazaic.
Wazaic, yeah.
Yeah, it's about an hour and 40 minutes north of New York. So Shane's there. He's, I think they've just released their own 10-year-old, not 10-year-old, their own whiskey as well. So good luck to him. He's always wanted to work and live in the United States, so it's great. But then Ian Kerr, who came up and was working with Shane for the first 3 years, just the two of them at the distillery, Ian has stepped up to the plate. He's our distillery manager, has been since 2019. You don't get Ian doing anything like this. You don't get him doing shows or festivals or talks or interviews. He's one of the most humblest men I've met. He just says, look, leave me alone. Just let me make the whiskey. Let me manage the distillery. That's what you pay me for. That's my job. If somebody needs a signature or whatever, I'll think about it. But at the end of the day, just let me get on with why I'm here. Now, for me, that's sometimes quite difficult, because people always want to have a chat with the master distiller, the distillery manager, get a photo opportunity and do everything like that. But Ian, bless him, is just like, get everybody away, just leave me alone. Let me get my job done. So he's like, I've described him sometimes when he's in the warehouse and he's popping up here and there. He's like a wee elf-like magical creature. He's 1 minute he's there, the next minute he's somewhere else. He's never stopped and he's always on the go. So even with our change in distillery manager, there was never a change in what we did. There was never somebody coming in and saying, well, I'm the distillery manager, I'm the master distiller now, and this is what we're going to do. Because again, it's about the security of what we do. And we've been doing it great with very little people for a little space of time. So we're satisfied and we're proud of the process. So let's continue to do that. Never say never in business. You never know what's going to happen in the future, or you never know which way the business is going to go. But if it ain't broke, you don't have to fix it.
And if I remember correctly from the very beginning of our conversation, it seems like, you Wolfburn did not put down, how do I put this? It didn't put down its official first spirit until the experimentation was done. You figured out the yeast that you wanted to use, the fermentation times, all of that. So which would contribute to a consistency, because you're not spending the first few years trying to figure out what that character is going to be.
Yes.
You know it before the spirit hits the wood. No, that makes sense. And Ian gets a pass because, you know, in outside the US, really, here we've got this celebrity focus on master distillers, master blenders. They got to be the face of the brand too, and they're not spending as much time on the floor, so to speak. Whereas in Scotland, Ireland, anywhere else, it's really, you know, as hell, we're talking right now, you know, you're the face of the brand, you get to be the representative around the world. And it's very different.
It is. And I'm proudly privileged to do the job that I do, but I wouldn't have as easy of a job, I wouldn't have as interesting as a job without these guys putting in the hard yards day to day, producing a great spirit. Because, as I say, if I was trying to push a spirit that I had no confidence in, or I had certain misgivings, or I wasn't really sure about it, it would make my job a lot easier. But because the spirit is, again, remember, I'm totally biased. I was born there, I grew up there, I'm now working for the distillery, but it makes my job very easy when these folk at the distillery are putting in their passion, their motivation to do everything to produce a great whiskey. So hats off to them, and hats off to Ian, because he's running the distillery, he's doing things, he's changing things, he's employing new starts, people just from school, apprentices. We've just started Nicola. She's been with us for a couple of months. She used to help out the bottling hall as well. So again, it's about training for the future. It's about, I'll say it again, that business continuity. We want to train people for future positions at Wolfburn. Our distillery manager, our second in charge, our deputy distillery manager is Innes. Now, Innes started with us 2016, 7 years in. He's 23. He's our deputy distillery manager because he has the knowledge, he's got the confidence, he has the training. And age shouldn't, everybody go, 23, but he's ingrained into the system at Wolfburn. He is part of the working beast of Wolfburn. He is an integral part. And this is what you want to do with a business. You want to train people, and you want to motivate them, and you want to guide them and mentor them in a way that they feel valued and respected as employees. But when I use the word employees, it's always nice for us to refer to the Wolfburn family, because we know everybody. Everybody knows each other. And that in itself creates a great working environment, because we're all pulling for the same we're all pulling for the same goal. We're all focused on what we should be doing and why we should be doing it to produce a great, unique spirit. So it's working.
That makes sense, and I like that idea of it's meritocracy. You're working your way up the ladders, and as you said earlier too, that even if whether people are staying with Wolfburn or whether they go on to another organization, another distillery, they're bringing that ethos with them.
Yeah,
which always reflects back on Wolfburn quite well.
It's like I mentioned our core range earlier on. Anything, you start with firm foundations. Any job that you do, you get the good grounding, the good training. It gives you a steady platform to then go the extra mile and to train up. And this is exactly what we're doing at the distillery with everybody involved as well.
Absolutely. All right. So got two more questions for you before closing out with the what is the outlook? And the first one is it's about that wood management. And so the question, of course, has to deal with the casks that you're using, how you're adapting the casks or adapting the spirit with the cask, and how they work together. And in listening to you and reading about you talking about it in the past, it reminded me of a recent podcast guest, being the Glenallachie,
Okay.
and how Billy Walker came in. And he's focusing much more on the maturation side. He knows he's got good spirit,
Yeah.
but focus on getting the best wood, the best casks, and showcasing the whiskey using those casks in a certain way.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to you and reading your interviews, it sounded the same kind of idea where you're trying to get wood that will add to or enhance the flavor
Yes.
of the Wolfburn core spirit without overtaking it.
Yes.
Or
exactly.
hiding it.
Yeah.
So I think let's just go into how did that particular decision kind of come about, or how does that work in practice for you guys?
Yeah. Again, I use the analogy of if you want something that everybody wants, you go to maybe, if like say for furniture, IKEA. No disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
You buy it, you build it, it's functional, you're happy with it. But if you want something unique, you go to a craftsman, you go to a carpenter, you get the wood, you get the space. They build something through their years of knowledge to bespoke artisanal design. And this is what we are trying to do with our wood management program. It's like scoring a goal for your team. You want your teammates to put you on their shoulders and drive you around or walk you around the pitch to the applause. So we want that Wolfburn DNA to be, the goal scorer. And we want the wood management program to be our team, to proclaim the spirit, as I said earlier on. How do we do that? We've got a great cooperage in Speyside. It's based in Keith, Ailsa Cooperage. The previous director, who's still involved, Ricky Proctor, a well-known character in the cooperage business. Again, Ricky knows what we want. He knows what our spirit is. He knows what we're trying to do, our flavour profiles. Again, you said it's about getting the best casks. There's no point producing a great spirit if you're going to put in a rubbish cask, whether you lose it because it's not made properly or it's not tightened, but it's easy to say, oh, we want the best casks and we want to produce the great spirit. But it's not, sometimes it's not as easy as that, because we don't have ever-ending pockets. A bourbon cask might be, say, €100 or 1,000 for a Spanish oak sherry butt as well. So it's like I get emails every week, not every week, every other week from cask sellers that have weird and wonderful types of cask for sale. I'll go back to what we said about Wolfburn, that we're traditional whiskey makers. So our bourbon cask maturation, we've got a combination of bourbon and sherry cask maturation, whether they're hogsheads or whether they're sherry butts. Our 10-year-old, which you may have heard a cork popping in the background. I have just poured a drop of our 10-year-old. It's now 10 to 10 at night, so this is my nighttime dram that I'm going to have. But we've done 2 finishes in our small batch in 2020. We did a port finish and we did a Madeira cask finish as well. Previously 5 years in bourbon casks. We hadn't done any sort of finished whiskies until those 2 those two opportunities. And I think, again, how that came about, we got the nod that these casks were available. So it's about that communication that we have with our cooperage. It's that communication we have with the cask buyers, shall we say. And it's about sometimes seizing an opportunity that if we think, is that going to be good for business? Is it going to be something unusual or something different that we want to try? Because all distilleries will tell you about their successes, but none of them will tell you about their failures. And our 5-year bourbon casks that were maturing beautifully, we use those casks in our Langskip, one of our core expressions, which is an absolutely banging dram. It's an absolutely cracking dram. So the fact that we decided to use I think it was a Fonseca port cask to do 6 months to do a small batch release, we weren't trying to hide anything with those excellent bourbon cask matured whiskies. We just wanted to give it just that wee bit of difference because we wanted to release something that we'd never done before. That's why we did it with the Madeira cask finish as well. So it's not as if we released these finishes because we had to fix the 5 years matured bourbon casks. You know, we don't have to do that because we've got supreme confidence in what we do. What we want is we want to be able to bring people to the brand, keep them on brand, and then give them and tease them and tantalize them with something that wee bit unusual from time to time. But again, not wild and wacky like herring barrels or Tabasco casks. And no disrespect, but as traditional whiskey makers, we want to cast our net wide. So there's a core range, the non-peated spirit in a lightly peated cask. We've got the Aurora, which is our sherry aged, which is a combination 50-50 sherry and bourbon. The Morven that you mentioned, lightly peated spirit, which we only do for maybe 2 or 3 months a year, and it's only 10 ppm. So again, when we talk about our wood management program not overwhelming our spirit, the ppm, the phenolic compound, we don't want that smokiness to overwhelm our spirit as well. We don't want that smokiness to deter from that beautiful fruity floral flavour. So the smokiness is just giving it an edge. And, you know, you've maybe heard me describe it as like a veil of smoke, and the flavour can actually come through as the veil flutters back and forward. You know, like the tide coming back and forward. We don't want it to be like a wall of smoke or a peat monster that you can't penetrate, you can't get round. We just want it to sit on the back palate. We just want that playful puff off now and again, and that fruity floral, light, vibrant flavour to still be there. The Langskip, the bourbon cask only maturation at 58% jumps up. But we've had rum casks. We've got some beautiful port pipes in our distillery. We've got some casks probably that I'm not allowed to tell you about, which is great because again, it keeps folk on the hook and they keep trying to get the information out of me. All shapes, all sizes, but traditional dunnage. So 5 warehouses on site. We might have to ask the neighbours if they've got some land to spare in the future, but let's just see where we go. It's not just about looking at next year or the year after. You know, you have to plan 5-10 years from now where we are. Farmers' fields on the other side of the Wolfburn, you know, would there be an opportunity for us to expand into them? You just never know. And these questions and these important decisions for our longevity are in our owners' hands, and they're always, you know, they're hands-on guys. They're at the distillery, they're hands-on. They know that the workings. They know it's amazing listening to when you speak to our owners just about how, you know, they don't just sit back and look at the distillery. You know, they're there. It's heartwarming. It really is, because it's part of them. And this is a business that they've always said before Yes, businesses buy, sell, go, do something else. This is now their business. This is now their their plan for like generational plan for business. Again, like any great distillery, passing through families since time immemorial. And this is why we love people coming at the brand at the moment, because kick back 15, 20 years from now, you're at the very start of Wolfburn, and there's not very many great distilleries that you say you were there at the very inception. So we're going on an adventure. I always say that. So come along for the ride. Come with us.
Absolutely. The last question I have with the wood management is, and I do agree with you that Vale is a great descriptor.
Yeah.
For the smoke. I actually had to go back and check whether there was peat when I tried the Northland, because it's very mild. Like if you're sensitive to peat, of course you're gonna notice it right away, but it was just that very end smokiness, barely vegetal, just enough. Yeah.
Just through the maturation, because it's a non-peated spirit matured in a peated water. And again,
exactly, yeah.
It's just that little nuance, just that little sort of burnt match smokiness to it. But it just gives it, folk just stop and go, wait a minute. And we like that. A whiskey is great. I love a whiskey that you nose it and you're thinking of A, but when you taste it, you get B. And you just have to, your brain just stops and gives itself a shake and says, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And that's when you have to focus what's in front of you. You have to concentrate, because it's giving you, it's giving you a wee low baller. It's giving you like the sidewinder, and you weren't expecting it. So I love that in a whiskey. I really do.
Absolutely. And have you found, so the last question on the wood management is, have you found that a particular ex-bourbon cask works best with the Wolfburn spirit?
No, I'll be honest with you. No, we don't stick with one. We tend to take a lot of the well-known bourbon casks in. Again, I think that's quite a sensible business solution to maybe putting all your eggs in one basket, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then you've got to change the entire profile of your spirit or your whiskey if it's an expression. But the good thing is, because our cooperage is in Speyside, it's part of the Speyside cooperage umbrella, although they all work in their own independent sort of fields. But the sort of buying power that the big cooperage has, and the access to some great casks, again, we just have to have the notification from the guys there, and they're usually good, because they usually know what we've discussed in the past, what we're looking for, and they're always looking to bag the best and the newest, or the I don't want to say cheapest either, because it's not just about buying the cheapest, because you've got to invest. Some of our casks, we haven't emptied yet. Some of our casks we've just, you talk about filling again. A lot of distilleries sell casks to people for their gardens and this, that. We very rarely have an opportunity to sell casks, because we're still using them. We're still young. Whenever there's a cask for sale, it's like a rampage down to the distillery, because somebody wants them quick, because they're like gold dust. So yeah, sorry, I don't know if you asked the question there, I've just gone off on one of my usual rant and tangents.
No, you're fine. The reason I asked is because really, unless you're looking for a specific cask to use, a specific bourbon cask, let's say.
Yeah, that was it.
I mean, chances are it's going to be Jim, Jack, Makers, or maybe Heaven Hill. It's it's really going to be one of those four, most likely. And there's there's nothing wrong with that. It's consistent. It's and especially if you're using it more than once.
We just on that, we had a good opportunity way back in 2014 to get, I think it was about 100 small Woodford Reserve bourbon casks, experimental, only 100 litres in size. So we used them for our small batches 128, which was a peated spirit. We did another next again year, the 270, which was a non-peated spirit in around about 30, 35 of these casks. And then the 375 came out in 2019. That was a non-peated with some sherry casks. And again, having an opportunity to like put our hands on and bag these small Woodford Reserve casks, it was a great opportunity for us to do something different and special.
It's I should have said, in addition to Jack, the general Brown-Forman portfolio has a lot of casks out there in the market. So Woodford in their early times, Old Forester, but yeah, I mean, it's what's out there, and it does really well. And I think, to the point of this entire conversation, if you've got a good spirit going into it that has its own character, you don't necessarily want something that's going to be out there for the cask, because you want the spirit to still be able to shine through. So
quite correct.
So with that, we'll close out just by mentioning, as you said, you just released last month the new 10-year-old. That's just out. The cask strength as well, is that a new release or an expanded release?
Our new cask release was released to the public today.
Oh, okay.
So this is a new 2023 cask release that we've done. 56.9, I think it is. I've not even had a taste of it yet. I've not even had a bottle of it yet. It will come to my lips very soon. But again, with a 10-year-old and the cask strength, it keeps people on the hook. For us, it keeps people interested, because our 10-year-old is full sherry maturation. We're also sherry casks. I'm lucky enough, I've got a sherry cask from 2014 and 2018 in the warehouse as well. So the 2013 casks that are coming out for our 10-year-old are sublime. It's an absolute pleasure. 46%, and it's going to be part of the core range as well. So it's adding to the portfolio of the business, which is great for us, because already it's selling across the world really, really well. And then we'll be looking at redoing orders very, very soon for it, because it's that you create that excitement with a young independent distillery putting out non-age statement whiskies, and then bang, you've got a 10-year-old. It's a milestone. It's like celebrating. I was on the 25th of January this year, 10 years. We're standing in the distillery looking at each other going, 10 years. This is 10 years old, just like eyes wide, and your mouth, your smiles like up to your ears, beaming, because you're super proud of that achievement. And everybody that was there was feeling exactly the same thing, because it is an achievement, it is a huge milestone, it is something to be celebrated. So yeah, cask release today. What's next? I'll keep that under the hat, I think. Keep you even more on the hook, just bait that even more.
Fair enough. I will have to search out for that 10-year-old. I'll talk to the guys at Impact, see what we can work out. But because I definitely want to keep up with what you guys are putting out. It's great stuff, and I really do like it. So with that, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about Wolfburn, about the ethos of the distillery, everything about it, the wood management. There's more to find out. We'll definitely have some tasting notes out that'll include more details on each of the releases that I've gotten to try already, and hopefully a couple that I'll get to try in the future. And what else am I forgetting? I feel like I'm forgetting something. In case you didn't catch that, by the way, their anniversary is Burns Night. So, yes, don't forget that. Easy way to remember it.
Sure is.
And with that, all the usual stuff. You'll hear it in the end roll too, but there will be links to social media to where to find these whiskeys. With the new distribution, there's going to be more of it around the country, around the US, which I'm very excited for. So if you're looking for it, ask your local retailer, reach out to Impex Beverages at impexbev.com, excuse me. Go to wolfburn.com, look at the distillery, look at the infographics, the videos of the distillery being built, we didn't even touch on that, but that's a great video to show.
Time lapse.
Yeah, it's wonderful. You don't get to see that. But with that, Mark, hold on with me for a sec after we finish recording. It's been another episode of the Whiskering Podcast. Thanks to you, everyone, for listening. I'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Hey, folks, thanks for listening to another episode of the Whiskering Podcast. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and click that subscribe, follow, or like button. Leave a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, and let me know what you want to hear. You can reach out to me through the podcast apps or email me at david@whiskeyinmyweddingring.com with any suggestions or ideas for new show guests. You can also support the podcast at patreon.com/whiskeyinmyweddingring. That's whiskey with an E, for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month gets you access to bonus content, including our soon-to-resume Under the Influencer series, and $25 a month means you join the Barrel Share Club. Each month, Barrel Share Club members get to try products sent to me for review, bottles from my own collection, and sometimes bottles that I just pick up because they're fun or interesting. Right now, only 5 spots remain in the Barrel Share Club, so grab your place today. Finally, please follow on Instagram. You can follow me at Whiskey in My Wedding Ring or at Whiskering Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Whiskey Ring. You can follow on Facebook at Whiskey in My Wedding Ring or join the Facebook group, the Whiskey Ringers group. And I hope to see you there. Cheers, thank you for the support, and see you next time.